everybody to another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. We are live on YouTube. If you feel like joining us, asking questions, comments, you have anything you want to throw in the box, we are here on Father's Day. And it's interesting because I'm sharing the studio with a guy who is not a father and yet also a father figure. And it's something I want to talk about right off the top. First of all, my wife put out, she doesn't tweet. She just exists on Twitter. She put out a tweet this morning about Father's Day. And she said, hey, to Chris and to Drew and people who consider themselves father figures, you guys make it look good. She had a lot of nice things to say about us. Chris, now that you're married, being a father figure to a child, how's that going for you? And what are your thoughts on that whole dynamic today?
I mean, my thing is, I gotta correct my levels because I'm better than you at this. My thing is, as like a stepfather, I only will implement the rules put forth by Jessica.
Which isn't a bad policy.
That's my policy when it comes to step parenting. I will only put forth the rules set by the mother. That's how I view things.
I'm doing this weird thing where I'm trying to break a lot of things, a lot of generational habits in my family with my children.
Like leaving?
You know what? I like that you went there with your joke. You guys, here. Okay, so what Chris is referencing is the fact that I have never met my biological father, which is one of the. It's a pretty stereotypical thing. If you ever get to know me, we can talk about it. But what I want to do is I want to start the show by saying this. I want to give a shout out to not just my father, but every father out there who didn't have to be. All right, when my dad met my mom, I was already 2, 3, and they got married when I was 5. And I had a little tuxedo, and I got to stand up there in the wedding. And it was a lot. And I was in elementary school, and my dad adopted me. And I remember that whole thing, having to go downtown to a court. It was this giant building. I'd never seen anything like it. I'm a little kid. And they were like, hey, do you like this guy? Is he pretty cool? Is he cool? And so we go through all this, and I grow up with him, and he's one of the best father figures I think a guy could ever ask for. He's just a dude. And on the Mount Rushmore of guys who are just solid dudes, Dave Gear's definitely up there. So, I was thinking about this yesterday because I'm literally rebuilding a part of my house that was damaged by the winter storms here. And he gets to my house, and he's telling me that he's been to the chiropractor for 2 weeks, and he can't play golf, and he can't do anything, and it hurts to bend over and pick things up off the ground. And yet, not only is he out here helping me and my brother complete a construction project at my house, but while my brother and I are on a ladder, probably about 25 feet off the ground, wrestling with the edge of this soffit, we're trying to nail stuff in place, and we're putting things. Here's my father on the ground going, you're doing it wrong. Come on, you just slot that thing in there. Don't make me come up that ladder and show you how it gets done. And I love him for that. He's a dude.
Dave Gear's no nonsense.
No nonsense. Dave Gear is the type of guy who can fix anything. He can do anything. He can do anything you can do. He can do it better, or at least tell you how you did it wrong. And that's a very dad thing, but he's one of the best. And I have learned an incredible amount from him. And I mean, my son carries his name. That's how highly I think of this guy. He didn't have to be my dad. He chose to be. And there's a huge thing out there. So there's a huge thing. Like right now, there's all these people who have fathers or are fathers, right? And you talk about how it's hard and it's difficult. And I go, yeah, but I know a guy who didn't have to be. He chose to be. And it makes me want to be a better father to my kids, having watched the way that he accepted me and the way that he raised me and the stuff that he taught me, even when it was tough love. I wouldn't be who I am, and for better or worse, without that guy. So I want to raise a glass, a toast, to all the fathers out there, whether you were a father biologically or whether you got to choose it. Good on you. I love you. Good luck to you. And Dad, I know you're watching this at home. I love you and happy Father's Day. Now, that's smooth and it's not as fruity as I would. I mean, because it looks like there's orange juice in there. Chris, what am I drinking?
Drinking a penicillin.
Ooh.
Quintessential bourbon / scotch cocktail. 2 ounces of scotch. 3/4 of an ounce of a combo of honey and ginger syrup. Same for lemon juice with a peated scotch float. I texted you last night. I got the opening to the show.
Well, hang on, because I've got the opening to the show. Let's put a pin in that for a minute, because we got to get to the football talk, or else people will lose their minds.
Oh, wait. I got that too. Hey, guys, it's Drew and Chris. We're the Rockpile Report, the longest-running Buffalo Bills podcast. Smash that like button, click subscribe, make sure notifications are turned on so you get notified whenever we're live.
You're such an idiot. So
we're not supposed to do that?
No.
We're not supposed to beg for follows?
It's gross. No, it's gross. You know what else is gross, Chris? Wide receiver Hakeem Butler, UFL Offensive Player of the Year. This is what I think. We are in rose-colored glasses season in a lot of these stories. Like everybody feels good about themselves, and they love giving themselves that big pat on the back. I'll tell you what. Everybody feels great about everything, and they feel confident about that to say a lot of crazy shit. Some of it has a Buffalo Bills lean, and I want to talk about it. Hakeem Butler of the UFL is Offensive Player of the Year. Former Bills head coach Wade Phillips says that there's no reason he shouldn't be in the NFL again. Now, first of all, Chris, when you fail, Mike Filipski, God, the comments, every time I look at him, it's always bad. It always just takes me right out of it. I lose all my steam.
I mean, Ryan Rhodes, please.
Ryan Rhodes is a G. I miss that dude.
We need more moonshine. We need moonshine for the upcoming season.
He's screaming into a microphone in the back of an RV. Wide receiver Hakeem Butler belongs in the NFL again? What, because you're the best player in what is like an after-school league? I want to read you from his draft profile. This came from Lance Zierlein of NFL.com of Hakeem Butler pre-draft. I quote, "His routes are basic and clunky and will limit how teams can use him. A greater concern will be those inconsistent hands that could turn quarterbacks against him unless he improves them. He's a work in progress, but the traits and potentials are worth taking a shot." So you've got bad hands, you're big, a long strider who doesn't run good routes, and so there's not a whole lot you can do on an NFL football field. Chris, he fell all the way to the 4th round after being talked about as a possible first rounder. Found himself somehow the odd man out in an Arizona offense to finish 25th and 17th in passing yards his first 2 seasons in the league. He didn't catch his first pro pass until he was already playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
That makes sense.
That's embarrassing. Of course he got washed out of the NFL. And so now, because he got to go play with a bunch of other guys who are about to be, like, the guys playing in the UFL or the XFL or any of these other leagues, like, yes, they're talented. Yes, they played college football. Also, most of them are one bad break away from being an electrician. That guy's going to be driving a forklift somewhere. That's the story you could tell about a lot of the guys who play in that league. So the fact that he's the best he's the player of the year. Now you've got teams taking a look at him, but look at who it is. It's the Panthers. See, the Jaguars want to bring him. Like all these teams that are rumbling about, oh yeah, we'll bring him in for a visit. They're not good football teams because their GMs know what they're dealing with. Now this could cut one of two ways because I've already seen it from Bills fans. Well, our wide receiver room, we should bring him in for a look. I will admit that he does fit the physical makeup of what our wide receiver room has become. Big, tall, wide catch radius. You would assume he could be physical in run blocking, but we don't know that for a fact. It cuts one of two ways because, Chris, he could be like Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas was drafted pretty high. Took a couple bounces around the NFL for him to find a landing spot that, like in Green Bay. And even then, he wasn't living up to his potential in their eyes. So they shipped him off to Buffalo, where he went on to have an amazing second half of the season. So it's entirely possible that all the guy needed was time, and that maybe Buffalo really is, with all the talk of come here to be the best version of yourself, Chris. Maybe there's a world where Hakeem Butler would fit on this roster. Or maybe, for those of you who understand hockey, or Sabres fans out there watching, maybe he's Mark Mancari. Yeah, Mark Mancari.
Fourth line guy
in the NFL. But in the AHL, Mark Mancari ruled. Mark Mancari was a 30-something goal scorer in the AHL. And so he stuck with the Rochester Amherst for years. And he would always be that first guy up. When there was a forward where they're like, oh man, we need a forward from Rochester. Who do we turn to? Let's get Mark Mancari. You'd bring him up, and he would be an absolute wallflower. The guy just wasn't built to play at that level. You have his hockey DB?
I mean, as somebody who doesn't vote left, I had to fact check you when you said 30 goals AHL. He's had 2 of those seasons.
Yeah.
One as a 29 goal scorer. So
yes. So he was very good in the AHL. He could show off in these leagues where it's guys who probably they themselves aren't very good. But the second you put him into the show, nothing. A giant nothing burger. Chris, what does he have for stats with the Sabres? If you look at all those different lines there.
Well, we can just read his NHL totals.
Yeah.
42 games, 3 goals, 10 assists, 13 points, 22 penalty minutes.
He had
22
penalty minutes and 3 goals. This is a guy who was lighting the world on fire. We all need to remember this, right? Guys who are going to come out of these other leagues, they talk about how it could be a feeder league or a spring league for the NFL. It will never be, because the only guys who are playing in those leagues are guys who couldn't be the fifth wide receiver or sixth wide receiver playing special teams for whatever the crappiest team for the Panthers.
You want to know what those leagues are good for?
What?
For legitimate, I don't want to say stars, but if you want to go to the UFL and find talent, there's 2 positions you're going to find talent at. That's punter and kicker. Because Jake Bates got signed, but 2-year deal to the Lions. He had, I think, 3 or 4 60-plus yard field goals in the UFL. That's the only position where you're going to be able to get a legit NFL contract and playing time.
At the end of the day, Butler was a 4th-round pick. Just one NFL target. Everyone talks about 6'5", 227. Oh, he's big. You know who else has those same measurables? Alan Lazard from the New York Jets. Go ask a Jets fan how they feel about that guy. I don't know. I just think that this is much ado about nothing, and I don't think he'll ever amount to anything, and I'm really tired of hearing people talk about him. You know who else I'm tired of hearing people talk about? I never want to hear the name Devin Singletary again. Do you know what he said this past week?
Dude, I don't give a fuck. He hasn't been here in 2 years.
He declared that he is a playmaker. He says, I'm a playmaker like Saquon Barkley. You can't say that. That's like me saying, I think I joked about it a year ago during our training camp shows. I'm 5'11" and at one point in my life was over 300 pounds. That doesn't make me Poona Ford. We're not the same. I can't put myself in that conversation simply because we're the same height and our statistics for maybe like a 7-week window maybe looked similar.
If Devin Singletary is Saquon Barkley, then you are Joe Marino. That's what that comes down to.
And that's what I'm talking about. Everybody feels really good about themselves, so they're just saying stuff. And everybody's taking the rosiest view of everything they can possible. The reality is Devin Singletary is a nice piece. Saquon Barkley was a second overall pick at running back for a reason. Right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Those of you out there in the comments, correct? Like, am I crazy? Oh, my God. And then, you know what really took the cake for me? Wide receiver Rashee Rice. He goes, accidents and stuff like that happen. All you can do is move forward and walk around being the same person. Try to be positive so that everyone can feel your love and your great energy. What? First of all, let's walk around being the same person. Is he talking about the guy who punched a photographer? Like, he wants to be that guy still. Or is he talking about the guy who ran away from a car wreck that injured 3 people? Which guy is he still trying to be today?
Do we talk about what, Kansas City's in the news again?
Yeah, well, Isaiah Buggs,
they deserve it.
This is just, because is there
a
franchise quite like the Chiefs?
We've won the offseason.
They're the Bengals. If it wasn't for Patrick Mahomes, they would get just as much grief as the Bengals used to. To think that the Bills had Marshawn Lynch, okay? He bumped a lady with his car. I've read, like, for those of you who are like, oh no, he's a scumbag. Did you read the police report? Do you actually know what happened with Marshawn Lynch downtown Buffalo all those years ago? He bumped a lady. It's raining, pouring rain. He's driving through the Chippewa, or it's like that area where all the clubs are downtown. So obviously there's drunk people walking around. And there's a drunk chick dancing in the middle of the street, which is obviously distracting. He alleges, and I believe him, because I've driven through that area, and it's anarchy if there's drunk people just wandering around in the street acting a fool. He bumps a lady, doesn't realize it until the next day when the cops show up to his house, and they're like, well, you hit and ran a girl. And he was genuinely remorseful and was surprised about it. He was labeled public enemy number 1 by our local media. She had 7 stitches and a bruise. I'm not trying to downplay a hit and run scenario, but in the pouring rain, this chick's dancing in the street in dark clothes with her friend and gets bumped by a car. Like, you look at that and go, this guy's he's a problem. We need to get him out of here. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum where there's a guy who is just a problem. And he's out here going, man, I just try to go every day. I just try to be me, just try to stay me, stay positive, all those good things. And the Kansas City media, what are they saying about Rice? It's awful quiet, isn't it? It's funny how depending on the city, like, Chris, do Super Bowls fix this? Like, are they just so fat and happy with their Super Bowls that their local media just doesn't feel like pressing the buttons of that team?
Could be.
What is it? What is it that keeps a press corps from just really pushing the team on answers as to how many of their players are involved in this kind of nonsense?
I don't know how you can push the team with the amount of arrests that they've been through. You just can't focus on football activities with the amount of arrests that have come around the Kansas City Chiefs.
Here's a better one. What would I have to do in order to get vilified by the Kansas City media? Chris, you've borne witness to some real atrocity. You've seen me do some wild things. What would I have to do to have that city's press corps mad at me?
The time that you threw the beer at the...
Well, that day, but guess what?
What?
That's not as bad as a hit and run. A blatant hit and run in broad daylight.
Also true, but if that guy was actually a cop and actually called the police...
Turns out he wasn't, right?
No.
Hey, we found out.
You called his bluff.
God. It's terrible, the position that all these guys are put in, where they feel very comfortable talking openly about how I'm just going to be me. I just got to keep doing what I do. That's not the way. That's not contrition. That's gross. but he feels so confident because we're looking at rose-colored glasses season, baby. It's a new year, a new page for everybody, and we all just get to come out here behind microphones and say shit. I think the other one, the last one I'll touch on before I get to the Buffalo Bills and their minicamp, was Mike McDaniels, and this might be the funniest one of the night. Talked about how the team is trying to use the number 24 as a motivational tool. Did you read about this?
No.
Okay. So, Mike McDaniels, because I don't want to misinterpret this, but 24 seconds. He said...
Was that the amount? Like, that's the amount of...
That's the number of years since their last playoff win. So what he said is, you get what you emphasize. Well, we're emphasize ways in finishing everything you do. So we obsess about the number. Right? So I had every staff meeting I put at like 7:24 or 3:24 or 5:24. We end our meetings with 24 minutes to go. Like we find our way to end our meeting at whatever time win 24 seconds. Chris, I get what he's trying to do, right?
Yeah.
This is the equivalent of what the Bills got roasted for, which is just putting the Lombardi on a banner up in the back of the practice facility.
Well, the Bills equivalent would be if they had all of their meetings start on the 32 for the wild card playoff loss to the Houston Oilers.
Imagine
we have a team meeting at 10:32.
Imagine if everything Sean McDermott did was tied to 13 seconds. How stupid though as a fan would you think your coach is if he said something like that? Like, this would be the equivalent of my head coach admitting that he's afraid of ghosts. I would legitimately I check under my bed every night.
I would think you're obsessive in a losing culture.
Yeah,
like that's a loser mentality to be focused. Like we're gonna have every team meeting at 7:32 for the Houston Oilers comeback, or 8:13 we're gonna have our first team meeting because of the Kansas City loss. We're gonna have a team meeting at 9:24 because we haven't won a playoff game in 24 years. Loser mentality.
If Sean McDermott told me that he's the type of guy who would shut the basement light off, but then run up the stairs really quickly because once upon a time somebody, it's like, oh, something bad happened to somebody in a dark basement once and I got to do this. Like, guys, what are you talking about? That's not real. That's not how any of this works. We're talking about, it's all nonsense. My head coach can clap all he wants, and he can say and do a lot of things. Like, Chris, we're actually going to have Tyler Dunn back in the podcast here in the upcoming weeks.
That's because I met with him on Friday.
I know.
For because I do stuff for Ty Dunn.
I know.
Go watch the podcast that's already out with Jay Skursky, who has us blocked. That's kind of fun when you have to edit a podcast where the guest you have is blocked by you.
Yeah. Like it's just funny to me. Like Ty Dunn's written all these pieces about Sean McDermott and about his mannerisms and how it is to be in the building and things that people call a hatchet job or a hit piece. And
hey, I will say, when I met with Ty on Friday, we'll have, if Ty wants to get into it the next time we have him in studio, I will just say Ty and Sean McDermott talked a lot about non-football things within their own respective lives.
Mm-hmm. Here's what I'm going to say. Everything that I learned about Sean McDermott through that Ty McDermott piece, or Ty McDermott, between Tyler Dunn's piece about Sean McDermott.
That's just Sean McDermott with Tyler Dunn's beard?
None of it is as stupid as what we're talking about with Mike McDaniels. This nonsense in 24 seconds. We're just going to think about it. We're going to drill it into our heads. The team, the Buffalo Bills, just flushed half their roster. And in the aftermath at golongtd.com, I go read the article. It's great. The interview that Brandon Beane did with Ty Dunn, he admitted that there is some benefit to kind of flushing the roster, which is some of these guys are walking around with the same scars, and we can't have that in the building. Like, you're getting fresh blood. Guys who aren't familiar with all the letdowns and all of the acrimony like we as fans walk around with.
I think there's a point to be made with the Stephon Diggs trade, because not just us, more importantly, Steve Mathis from Air Raid Hour, who caught a lot on social media from. So we had the both of us together. We had this thing of there's no way Stephon Diggs can get traded.
Yeah,
based on his cap, his cap figures. Nope, you can get traded, and that should keep everybody within the roster on edge. Like, even though Stephon Diggs had his cap, like, those weren't numbers that you should trade somebody, and we did it anyway. That should keep people on edge on the 53-man roster. Like, whoa, we can get cut, we can get traded. It doesn't matter what our numbers are.
You know what else should have everybody on edge right now? Everyone should be on edge because in Bill's minicamp, watch out now, Chase Claypool looks good in shorts. Woo! Chase Claypool looks like a rock star. What an idiot we are. Like, what is a fan base, as a people? I see individuals getting fired up over the concept of Chase Claypool. It's one of the more infuriating things to me because he is, like, if he wasn't, Chris, if Chase Claypool didn't come into an environment like Bill's offseason, like, practice and offseason OTAs and then mini camp, if he didn't stand out over what we currently have on the depth chart at wide receiver, I would be stunned. Right? Like Keon Coleman.
Well, Sophia is fired up about Claypool, and I don't. Can you please let me know when I can get into last night?
Hang on.
About my wedding, because we have women in there, and that matters that we have female viewers.
Oh my God! So here's when I take a look at the depth chart. I just had to pull it up. Keon Coleman. Now, if Keon Coleman was standing out, making a lot of flash plays, I'd be like, okay, cool, that's noteworthy, but it's also still summertime. If you told me, hey, Khalil Shakir looks sharp, Curtis Samuel looks awesome, great, wonderful. Here you go. It's got it up in front of me. See, this is what having a great producer is all about. Mac Hollins, you could tell me like, oh, he's standing out and making plays, and I would say to you, okay, cool. Yeah, see, so it's happening to me too. It's not just, okay.
There you go. Fixed. Allegedly.
Chase Claypool, he's been in the league for years. He was a second-round draft pick. He got 210 targets in his first 2 years in the NFL. He's none of these journeyman types that make up the rest of our depth chart. He was, or at least he was a guy who was drafted not to be one. Spends 2 years in Pittsburgh, right? Then he's Pittsburgh and Chicago. Then he's in Chicago, and Chicago gets sick of him. They fire him to the curb. Then he goes to Miami, where he plays in 9 games and has 7 targets, and one of those happened to be the division-sealing interception against the Bills. Teams need to stop tricking themselves into this, and we as fans need to stop tricking ourselves into believing that a guy who has a... Look at his catch percentages, Chris. If I start at the top, first of all, he had his best season right before he got traded from Pittsburgh in terms of catch percentage, which was 64%. He has never, if you remove that season, he has never cleared 57. 56. Okay? 56, 56, 38, 28. 57.1, and I'm not giving him credit for the 0.1. This guy is everything you hated about Gabe Davis. He's got a worse personality, and yet fans are getting excited about the fact that he looks good in shorts. Why? Can we just... Like, I almost wish they'd cut him now, instead of making us wait until the end of training camp to watch him do it.
I was telling Greg Trelone, who's
So you can talk about the.
I mean, I'm dying to get to this because it's for female listeners.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, Lauren is still in the chat, Sophia in the chat. They would back me up on this, but I was at a wedding last night. And I was Greg Trelone, YouTube channel. Go look him up, Greg Trelone. He's a flag holder for the Bills. I was like, hey, Chase Claypool looks good in shorts. And he was like, I don't give a fuck. Cut him now. I don't want to see him near my football team, which is the same feeling that I have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see Claypool. Cool. You had Roethlisberger. You couldn't do it. You got traded to Miami. You had a Tua and an offensive head coach. You couldn't do shit.
He didn't get traded to Miami. He got traded to Chicago.
Okay, well.
And then he had Justin Fields, which doesn't mean much. Then he signs with Miami and literally couldn't make a dent on the roster of the number one offense in football. Dude couldn't make an impact. Why are we as a fan base allowing ourselves to be talked into the idea of Chase Claypool?
I can't wait till he gets cut.
It's going to be one of those players where it's like he was a free agent signing that came cheap. But at the same time, what I think about is I'm thinking about other guys who we got hyped about in preseasons.
Brandon Riley?
No, not UDFA types, like veteran types, where we were like, oh no, this is a player. Like, who can you think of? Guys, if you're in the chat, who can you think of from preseasons past who you were like, oh, this guy's going to be awesome? And he goes on to be nothing. I remember the year we had to cut Manny Lawson. And
That's who I was going to go to, Manny Lawson.
I didn't realize that Manny Lawson, his job was getting given to Lorenzo Alexander. And I said, oh, Lorenzo Alexander, he better be pretty good. And then he goes to the Pro Bowl. He goes to the Pro Bowl. It's like, oh, okay. All right. Well, this guy has a name and I'm familiar with it, but that doesn't mean that he's good. That's the problem. He has a name. He's been around. I think fantasy football does more for his stock than actual football. Like, I remember the years where everybody loved Chase Claypool. What they don't understand is that he's not. I mean, 7 targets in a single season in a pass-first run-and-shoot offense in Miami.
I had to pull this up. You see it on our lads.
Yeah.
All the way to the far right. Greg Little.
Greg Little.
There you go.
Wow.
You even go down. Player number 2, Greg Solis.
The 2016 Bills were wild at wide receiver, and I feel like, Jesus. All right, so we've crossed that bridge. We understand Chase Claypool. You know how I feel about him. How do you guys feel about James Cook and his hands?
I was going to say Joseph Fryer in the comments. Pertaining to Claypool, everyone loves a reclamation project.
Everybody loves an underdog. Of course they do. Why do you think we're still Bills fans? We've been rooting for them. We are an underdog as a city. Sometimes deservedly so. Other times because literally, like this whole thing of the city of good neighbors. You have to get along as a community because sometimes the weather just tries to kill you all. It just drops 6.5 feet of snow. I know because I've lived through 3 now. I live 7 minutes from the stadium. I live in the snow belt. 3 times in 2 years, I've been hit with more than 5.5 feet of snow in a 24-hour, 48-hour period. I will tell you this. Having lived through the blizzard of 77, this city, the identity of it became you have to be friends with the people around you. You have to get along as a community or you will not survive. And so you become good neighbors because even if I don't like you, I'm still going to help you. And that became the backbone of, it kind of became our culture here. And so then that year, obviously there's people coming in, there's people leaving, but that has kind of remained in a lot of pockets around Buffalo. You still have people who feel that way because they were raised that way. And so we all root for this place because we know it's this really well-kept secret. All over Buffalo, there's either murals or there's signs to keep Buffalo a secret. It's because of that dynamic. We don't want the whole world knowing that this place is pretty cool for the most part. Like, obviously, it has its problems like any other place. But the thing is, we've always been underdogs. As soon as Bethlehem Steel closed up, as soon as this became a Rust Belt city, we were losers. And so it makes sense that you root for other losers because you want to see them win. You know what? I'm tired of doing that. At least in terms of my football leanings. I'd prefer to root for guys who are just winners. I don't want reclamation projects. You know what I want? I want a guy who just knows how to win and knows how to do his job well. Now, if the Buffalo Bills and Sean McDermott can somehow transform Chase Claypool into this guy, I'm all for it. But how often does it happen in the NFL? How often does a guy go somewhere and completely reinvent himself after having multiple stops elsewhere where it just didn't happen, Chris?
I have no idea. When can I talk about the wedding?
Talk about the wedding in a minute. Right now, I'm talking about James Cook and his Teflon hands. Bills fans have a lot of feelings about the fact that James Cook struggled last year with untimely drops and ball security. It's been talked about a lot by pundits as like the one thing in his game that like, oh man, if he just fixes this, like it'll put his game together and he'll be this complete back. I don't think that they understand he's not alone. If you look at drop rate by NFL running backs last year, he was tied for 8th in the NFL, which is pretty high. Latavius Murray was 6th. So for everybody who thought Latavius Murray was doing a great job as the passing down running back, you only had one job. It was be bigger than everybody else and protect our quarterback, occasionally slam a pile forward, and catch the ball. Somehow he finished with a higher drop rate. We were the only team. Also, Chris, fuck us. Like, we were the only team in the NFL to finish with 2 running backs in the top 10 for drop rate.
Makes sense. That's
why Ray Davis is here, I suppose, right?
Lauren wanted O.J. Howard to work out when we signed him. One of your favorites.
And how did that go? O.J. Howard, let's make this work. And then you pay him $3 million to go sit and drink on a beach. Fuck. In the top, like the upper echelon of drop percentage for running backs, you know who else was up there? Kyron Williams. Pretty good season. Saquon Barkley. Pretty good talent. Josh Jacobs. Aaron Jones.
Carlos Williams.
Carlos Williams, the only thing he's fumbling is packages at the grocery store where he stocks shelves. Carlos Williams. I remember when I thought he was the heir. He was going to be the heir apparent to Sean McCoy. And I waited on hold for a half hour to tell the guys at WGR as much. And then when they finally got me on air, like my buzz had kicked back up and all that happened was I just stream of consciousness just yelled into the phone. And then I hung up on them. Like I thought I had hit a walk-off and this is my drop the mic moment. And then I listened to it on the replay and it was one of the there was just, after I hung up, there was just 3 seconds of silence and Mike Shope just going, well, that happened. And they just burst out laughing and went to the next caller. As one should when someone's drunk enough to suggest Carlos Williams was going to be great. But there's a lot of recognizable names on the list around James Cook when it comes to his drops. I understand that everybody wants him to be this perfect running back because that's what you want when you draft a guy in the second round. You're like, oh, this guy, he needs to become the thing for my football team. The reality is you probably can't have your cake and eat it too. You probably can't have a running back who catches the ball and makes these electric plays and also does an amazing job running the football. When you look at what he did on the ground statistically last year, despite his small size, it's really hard to argue. 4th in rushing yards. 3rd in the NFL in successful rush rate, which means that you got, on first down, you got more than a certain percentage of the yardage necessary for a first down. On second down, there's another percentage tied to it. And then on third down, you got the first down. He's 3rd in the NFL in successful rush percentage. 10th in the NFL in yards per attempt. and only 29th in fumbles, even if the couple that he had were really painful. I guess the question's going to be, Chris, how much grief do people want to give James Cook? And how much of this is based on the idea of what he could be and what he was sold to us as versus what he actually is? When he came out of the draft, he was talked about as being this electric, pass-catching running back. Turns out at the NFL level, and a part of me almost wonders how much of this relates to how Josh Allen throws the football. Like, we've talked about that. We talked about that with Anthony Prohaska from Cover One, about how screenplays have been hard forever for the Bills since Josh Allen got here.
Because we had Shane Gailey.
Well, Josh Allen just does not throw a good screen pass. He just doesn't. And that becomes a little problematic if you think about, if you think about what it is to have to put loft and a little touch on just a very short pass. You can't rocket this thing. You have to almost float it into the wide receiver's hands while he's in motion. And if it's a running back, it's even harder because he's not a receiver. That's not his job. His job is to run the ball, but also I might be able to catch it. It's hard. And so with that in mind, you're looking at a guy who is, in terms of rushing the football, he's a Pro Bowl talent. He just can't catch the ball. And the problem is that everyone, when they looked at him coming out of the draft, was married to this idea that he would be that. So I feel like that's where a lot of this angst is coming from. Now,
third out of the class. Breece Hall, first running back at 36 overall. Kenneth Walker, the second at 41st overall. And then James Cook went third overall at 63. Third running back off the books in that draft class.
Okay. Who do you think is better? Who would you rather have, James Cook or Kenny Walker III?
That's like a toss-up.
You think so?
100%. I think that's. Has he not been injured? Has he not spent some injury time? I'll have to click on his name.
He has. But here's what I look at. When I'm thinking about just the rushing, right? Rushing direction. So when you saw James Cook and you saw that he was a slighter running back, and then you hear that he's a receiving threat, you think to yourself, okay, they're going to run him outside the I hearken back to CJ Spiller. And I say to myself, they're going to run him outside the tackles a lot, or at least they're going to try. They're also going to try to get him on some counter runs, some misdirection, and they're going to get him the ball in space and throw it to him. Well, when you look at where he rushed in his yards per carry, yards per attempt, 4.1 when running off left guard, 4.5 when running behind center to the right, 4.9 yards per carry running behind the right guard. He did a phenomenal job running between the tackles last year, which is something that if you were told he was a small receiving back, but very fast, that's not how you would assume he would be used. I think that the time has come for Bills fans to just take a look at what this might be. Now, maybe he comes in this year and he's completely reinvented himself, but the reports started to emerge as soon as minicamp started that he was already back to dropping passes. And everyone gets all in their feelings about it. And I think you need to understand, he is an electric talent with the ball in his hands. If he's not a great pass catcher, then that's okay. You as a football team just need to find somebody else to do that job. Chris, why do you think Ray Davis is here? I firmly believe that played a role when you looked at who Braylon Allen was and who some of these other running backs that Bills fans made themselves really familiar with throughout the draft process. Nobody was thinking Ray Davis. Ray Davis was highly productive. He had a lot of things going for him, but we weren't thinking about that type of running back. We were thinking about a hammer. We said we need a big physical guy to offset the fact that we have a guy who's supposed to be a pass catcher and supposed to be a guy who can play in space. Well, they just went out and drafted one. A guy who he's highly productive in the NFL, but also catches the ball really well. There's a picture, there's a GIF of him online. Clips of him catching an over-the-shoulder fade to the back corner of the end zone, and he catches it. It's like, that's a crazy route to have a running back run in the first place. A wheel route into the back corner of the end zone. And you're going to put it over a taller defender, and you just trust that he's going to come down with it. That's the type of player they drafted, I think in part because they recognize, hey, we might never get the catching that we need out of James Cook, but when we put the ball in his hands, he's electric with it. So let's let him be what he is instead of what we all thought he would be. If the front office can admit it, I think we as fans need to admit it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Chris, did you want to tell your story?
About time.
Actually, that's too bad because we're going to talk about Tyler Bass. Guys, I've got him on the hook now. Do the Bills have a Tyler Bass problem, Chris?
Maybe. I don't know. The best UFL kicker got signed by Detroit to a 2-year deal, so I don't know. And you can't go get Chase McLaughlin because he's I mean he's on his like ninth or 10th team, but you gotta stick with T-Bass.
Well, so I think it was 2 weeks ago, we did a podcast and I was like, what started this all was the vitriol that Sal Capaccio caught because he mentioned that in practice, Tyler Bass hit like a 70-yard field goal, or no, like a 60-something yarder. And all the boo birds came out. And I was like, what the hell happened to these people? Why are you mad at a kicker? And then reports start to come out of minicamp this week that he struggled. He struggled. He had some bad practices. People took note of it. In fact, I think the perp was Alex Brasky from
Cover One?
Bills Digest. No, Alex Brasky, Bills Digest. He's out of Batavia. God bless him, Batavia. But I digress. Tyler Bass has struggled. He was fantastic his first couple of years in the league, which led to him getting an extension here, and I feel like he hasn't really lived up to said extension. He's had some questionable kicks in pretty big moments for the team, and I feel like just like James Cook's drops and fumbles, even though they're not as plentiful as we think they are, we feel them because as fans, those are the moments we remember. We remember Tyler Bass missing that kick in the playoffs against the Chiefs. I think we remember the Tyler Bass missing a kick to go up 2 scores against the Giants and letting the Giants almost come back and win that game. There's a lot of things that we remember because they happened in moments that just kind of, due to happenstance, became a talking point because this guy missed a kick. Now, his field goal percentages, Chris, really haven't ever been great, right? We remember him for being good, but his very first season in the league, he only had 82.4%. He had an uptick to 87, and we were like, all right, cool. Because we watched him be automatic from inside 30, which he still is. Like, if I were to tell you that he has not missed a kick from inside 30 in his career, you probably wouldn't believe me right now if you're a fan, the way people feel about him. If I told you that, Chris, how many misses do you think he has from 30 to 40?
Bass?
Tyler Bass, off the top of your
30
head.
to 4. 5.
See, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 is the number in 4 seasons. From 40 to 49.
Joseph asked the question in the chat. Do you got to stick with T-Bass? Do you?
Well, so this is what I'd like to point out. From 40 to 49 yards, Chris, in 4 seasons, how many misses does he have? Just guess.
God, Burning Rob in the chat, but we're also putting them into 49 plus too often.
Yes. Yes.
49 plot 40.
Yes.
So what did your
So hang on. So
What-
30 to 39. Hang on. 30 to 39 yards. He
He had-
missed 7 in 4 years. How many do you think he missed from 40 to 49?
I'm gonna go with one hand.
5?
Yes.
That is the number. He's
Nailed
missed
it.
fewer kicks from 40 to 50 than he has from 30 to 40. He is a good NFL kicker. 50 plus. He was 6 of 4 in his first season. He was 4 of 2 his second season. He was 3 of 2 in 2022, and he was 6 of 4 last year, or 4 of 6 last year. Jesus Christ, I just transposed all these numbers. But you get what I'm saying. He's missed a couple, but he's made some bangers. If you're hitting 50 plus more than once or twice a year, yes, you're doing your job. Also, your team probably shouldn't be putting you in those positions. And thank you for hitting on that in the chat. This team, you can argue, has leaned on him a little too much. I would argue that they put too, now that it's almost that thing of, well, we know that you have a strong leg. We know you're good from 40-50, so we just play a little bit too loose. Because we feel like, well, it's going to be automatic. Now, when he misses that kick, people get mad at him. But whose fault is it that he's kicking from 47 yards? Is it his fault that the offense stalled out?
No, he's putting his own. It's situational. Let me get a hand clap in there. A McDermott hand clap. Situational football. If you're put by your offense in a 50-plus situation, you got to hit it.
Now, do you know what happens if we cut Tyler Bass? This is what I want to talk to people about kickers. We all romanticize the ideas of the kickers who we remember. Or at least we think we remember. But I'm going to take you down. I'm going to take you on a trip here. Follow me, guys. In fact, I'm getting a fresh beer for this. Oh, I almost grabbed one of those mango peach nonsense things. So follow me here. The Buffalo Bills reached out when they were rebuilding. Okay? When they were rebuilding, and they said, hey, you know who we need? We need Steven Hauschka. Let's go get him. Steven Hauschka, free agent. Seattle decided to move on from him. He had 3 good years for the Buffalo Bills. Or at least a good year. You know who came before him? Dan Carpenter.
Ew.
Do you remember Dan Carpenter?
Yeah.
Do you know when Buffalo signed Dan Carpenter?
I mean,
Think about it.
I'm not going to say the words that were said, but you said something in your own home on Poinciana with Reed Ferguson. Bill.
Hey, whoa. That's because somebody ran my kicker, and I'll say some wild shit. Here's what you need to know. Dan Carpenter was the kicker for Miami for a long time. We got real familiar with him. He finally had a down year where he kicked 81.5% of his field goals and missed a bunch from 50 plus. And they go, well, he can't hit the long ball anymore. We don't need him. And the Bills sign him. He immediately goes up to a 91% field goal rate, maintains high 80s, and proceeds to, for the next 4 seasons, rattle off what? He's 4 of 6, 6 of 8, 3 of 5. Like, he was good from 50. He was automatic from 40 to 49. And he was great right up until 2016, and he hit a wall. That's why we had to bring in Steven Hauschka. The year the Bills broke the drought, we had Steven Hauschka. The reason why is because Dan Carpenter finally petered out. But he had a career rebound as soon as Miami released him, and he went to another team that wasn't constantly putting him in bad situations. So then you look at that and say, okay, so Steven Hauschka came here, and he was good right up until he wasn't. And the offense couldn't sustain him in 2018, 2019. And we were in 2019, Chris, you remember that offense? We made the playoffs. But was that Bills offense great?
No.
No. So we were putting him in a lot of ugly situations. And so in 2020, we drafted Tyler Bass and released Steven Hauschka, and that was the end of him. Just like we signed Dan Carpenter and he had a career revival, and then we released him as soon as he had a bad year.
You have
Do you know who else?
Burning Rob in the chat. You essentially have to separate kickers into 3 different kick stats based on range of kick and sample size.
Yes. And this is a team that doesn't kick a ton of field goals, but when we do, we kind of need them, right? Like, if the offense stalls out, our offense is one of the higher scoring offenses in football, regardless of what anyone wants to think. So if you're in the top 10 consistently, then yeah, your kicker's not doing a ton of work. But when he does, you need him. But here's what I'll say. You know who else had that dynamic? A guy named Steve Christie. Steve Christie played for Tampa in 1990. 1991, he hit 75% of his field goals, and they cut him. He finds his way to Buffalo in 1992 and hits a long of 54, a career long at that point. A long of 59 the following season, a career long. Goes on to every season hammer at least one from over 50. In games, Chris, he played from 92 to 2004 in a Bills uniform. That's pretty wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he was up and down. He did have down years. 1995. He only hit 77% of his field goals. But you would rather have a guy you trust to make the easy ones. Look at this. 1994, 12 of 11 of 12 from inside 30. 13 of 14 the following year, inside 30. That dude had to kick 14 field goals from inside, basically right on the cusp of the red zone. Because we were at the end of the Super Bowl runs. The shine had come off this thing on offense, and it wasn't great. We would stall on the doorstep, and here was a guy who could cash more often than not. How do you get rid of that guy?
You cut him.
You don't. You keep Steve Christie around forever. I think now the problem is everybody looks at this team and they get this panic in their chest where they go, well, we need to win a title, and I see Jake Bailey hitting 60-yard field goals, and I see, Harrison Butker for the Chiefs.
Making correct statements about family.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I hate you. Guys, I like that he says things just because he's trying to get a reaction out of everybody. And some of you just absolutely take the bait and then send me an angry email. Why do I got to deal with the fact that he's an idiot? And he's just, look at his hair. He's trying to fight you all just by carving his skull that way. He's trying to pick a fight with me every single week I come in here just by putting product in his hair.
I can't even tell, but there's I mean, you guys see it. I got a piece of hair sticking up. You guys see it.
I hate him. I absolutely, he does these very hateable things like that. So here's what I'll say. I understand the angst about how you think Tyler Bass's struggles are somehow tied to our failures. But at the same time, how much of this do you want to put on a kicker? Yes, I want a kicker who can hit a 50-yard field goal in the clutch when I need it. I'd much rather have a guy who just does the routine things the way they need to be done, who can sometimes rise above and carry my team, and I'd put more on the offense to go, hey, don't put my kicker in a position like this. You do know that in a dome, he can probably hit one from 60.
Yep.
But let's not flirt with it. Let's not find out, right? Let's not find out how many he has to hit from 50. I think that that's the mindset you have to adopt towards kickers, because realistically, they control nothing other than what happens with this. They don't control the snap. They don't control the hold. They just kick the football. They're not the reason that they're in a position they have to kick the field goal.
Joseph, just wait till the Sabres make the playoffs. I'll grow a quality beard. I can grow a quality beard. I shave every third or fourth day. I can grow a quality beard.
Lauren Oubre
Trust me on that.
Lauren Ubry in the chat. Perfect point. If Stephon Diggs catches that pass he should have caught, we're not talking about Tyler Bass missing a kick in the Kansas City game. That's not a conversation we have to have. This is my point.
Rob in the chat. Chris has been saying this and hinging on it about the Sabres since 2016. Yes, I have. And now that we got Lindy back, it's a thing.
Oh God.
Can I get to the wedding?
All right, guys. I told Chris he could open the show with this story. I'm now going to allow him to close the show with the story because
Lauren. I hope Lauren and Sophia are in the chat because this slightly involves female viewership, and by female viewership I mean Sophia and Lauren are the only ones. Maybe Molly from Texas.
Molly from Texas is pretty cool.
Yeah. So I went to a wedding last night, and I told Jessica's cousin's husband, who I've met one other time, I made it a point to let him know that he looked like shit.
Wait, what?
He looked... Lauren and Sophia in the chat. Would you ever let your man go to a wedding? Now, mind you, Nick he's a man's man. He's got like the man like what I do for work. He's got like a man's job. Would you let him attend a wedding in fucking pleated pants?
Ooh, that's a bad look.
The answer's no.
All right. Well,
no.
You're a fashionista.
I am. Let me get to this. So I've met Nick once, and I made sure to tell him, you look like shit with your pleated pants. And he proceeded to tell me that they were also from Kohl's, which I predicted that they were from Kohl's. They were from Kohl's. And because I wanted to take him shopping. Nick was like, I've been to worse, like, I understand that what you're telling me, that I look like shit. I get it. I've been to worse weddings. And I'm like, there's no way you went to a wedding and wore pleated pants. And he pulls out his phone. He goes, I went to a wedding last year. Shotgun shell boutonnieres.
No.
Yes. This is like a you wedding. Like this is like a you.
If I was allowed to plan it,
I saw pictures. Shotgun shell boutonnieres. Shotgun shell boutonnieres. People had overalls on. I'm looking at these photos.
Listen,
Flabbergasted that somebody would allow that are significant. I did see a guy. I will say this. I did see a guy last night. He had jeans on. Jeans on. If Lauren and Sophia, if you're still in the chat, I would expect them to dump their significant other if they had worn jeans to a wedding.
Now, let me say this. I have done the opposite where I went to a wedding and my buddy who's getting married, goes, guys, it's not going to be a big fancy thing. It's just like it's at a post out here in like just outside of Pembroke. It's going to be a thing, small thing. A bunch of my family come and it's sort of casual. And I go, sort of casual at a wedding sounds like business casual. But I'm going to be there. I'm going to dress for a wedding. So I'm going to wear a suit and a tie and and so me and my friends, I even convinced my one friend, I loaned him a tie. He didn't have a tie. I gave him one. Foo, you're welcome. I give this guy a tie. We show up. Chris, 2/3 of the people there are in jeans and cargo shorts. And now I look like a fucking boob. I am one of the best dressed people here, and I'm the one being lampooned here.
I love Lauren in the chat was like, was this guy heavier set? Yes. He had slightly above build for a male. He was heavier set, and you know what was cool was I was like, you got to take.
There's nothing wrong with being heavier set.
I was like, you got to take those pants back to Cole's, and because his wife was within earshot, was like, hey, Ash, where did you get these pants? She's like, I got them at Cole's. I fucking knew it. Of course you got them at Cole's. Let me tell you this about the wedding.
I like that our listeners are picking up on the fact that you are you're a fashionista, and yet at the same time, guys, so Chris stood up in my wedding. Here's a funny thing. He didn't think that salmon was a color. He goes, no, that's not a real color.
Salmon is not a color.
And then the whole next day we're fighting about it. So we're standing down by the Buffalo Harbor getting our pictures taken for our wedding, down by the pier, the waterfront, the whole nine. And I turn around and I go, hey, random dude walking by, is salmon a color? He goes, yes. I go, would you call someone who says it's not an idiot? He goes, of course. Screw you, Chris. I do judgmental clothing takes.
Lauren is my college boyfriend once put on a braided belt, and I made him throw it out right then and there, and told him I wouldn't go out in public with him wearing that. Yeah, let me tell you this about okay, so everybody knows that Joseph, salmon is not a color at all.
No, nobody knows that. You're the only one who thinks that's a thing.
It's not a color. It's not a color. So I'm on B shift now. So now my days to drink are Saturday, Sunday, and that's it. So at the wedding,
like the rest of us.
Yeah. So at the wedding last night, I went I asked. They only had, get this, Seagram's American whiskey.
Yes.
And Jim Beam were the only bourbons, whiskeys I had to choose from.
Yeah,
I told the bartender, I go, let me get an old-fashioned Jim Beam. She looked at me like I had 6 heads. I watched her make an old-fashioned. She shook it.
That's why you can't see.
She shook.
See, Chris, you've been hanging out in too many bougie establishments.
You know what the next move is? Okay. You can't make an old fashioned. I get that. The next move is let me get a Manhattan. Shaken. Shaken. She shakes it. A Manhattan. Shaken. No. And I even tried later, 4th cocktail. Let me get I broke down in mathematical terms the Manhattan. I go, let me get an ounce of sweet vermouth, 2 ounces of Jim Beam, some bitters, stir it, shaken, again, shaken. I get shaken. I'm like, this is my 3rd cocktail of the day, Father's Day, because we had family over earlier. Mm-hmm. I might have a 4th to make up for last night and how fucking bad it was.
Well, if we want to talk about how bad it was, I've got one last training camp talking point, or mini camp, before we wrap the show, and it's injuries. The Buffalo Bills, and it sucks, are coming into minicamp and leaving minicamp with a list of nagging injuries that hopefully, you hope that they're gone, you hope that it's not a problem, but we have to keep an eye on these things. It's hopefully a month and change does a lot of good for some of these guys. Sean McDermott admitted during his opening presser for minicamp that Buffalo had been hit by the injury bug, quote unquote. 7 players sat out of the first practice. And then there was only 3. There was 3 more were limited. So now you're down to 80 guys, if everyone reported. And then Khalil Shakir leaves practice with what I'm assuming lower body injury, and he comes out with a sleeve on. I'm assuming it's a hamstring. Chris, that's a problem.
Yes.
He's a guy that we're all looking at going, well, everything's going to be okay because we have a Khalil Shakir. And he immediately just, boop, popped something. Didn't practice again for the rest of minicamp. That's not good. You look at the guys who have been missing time and you think about the health of the roster and you think about what the last couple years has seen. During the beginning of Sean McDermott's tenure here with the Buffalo Bills, we were one of the healthiest teams in the NFL. And it's one of the reasons we were successful. We didn't sustain a lot of injuries. 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. We were the healthier teams in football. Then, like last year, actually 2022, we saw some of it. And then last year, it really reared its head with our linebacking core. There was a lot of injuries. There was guys who missed some significant time. There was guys who just played through injuries, Josh Allen included, for the second straight year, playing through an injury that everyone's like, well, hopefully this one doesn't need Tommy John. Oh, his shoulder's banged up. Hopefully it's not an AC joint sprain and it doesn't force him out for 2 to 3 weeks. They find a way, but it's not great. And so with that in mind, you look at what the depth of this roster is and go, well, I hope we have the right pieces in place. Chris, it's not a good place to start, especially the Khalil injury.
No.
That sucks. That's hard to swallow. The one place where it seems like we do have depth that no one wants to talk about is the fact that Khalil Shakir had a great start to this season program. Now, he's a guy who, Chris, can you honestly say that you think he got a fair shake?
Claypool get a fair shake?
Well, yeah, he was drafted in the second round and he was targeted 100 times his first year. When he got drafted in the second round, he was used by his team. He wasn't good, but he was used. Khalil Shakir was forced to kind of ride pine because Christian Benford took his job. But that doesn't mean, now earlier I joked about Rasul Douglas's experience being like not a trope, but like not everybody can fit that mold. But here's a cornerback who's been here. He's been learning the playbook. And when you drafted him, you kind of knew that he had a play style that didn't necessarily slot right in to a given thing of what you wanted to accomplish as a football team defensively in terms of your scheme. Khalil Shakir has had a great start to the offseason program. So it starts to open up questions about what do they do here? Now, I know we talked in a previous podcast about what they do with the $8.5 million they have left. I don't know that they're close to landing a pass rusher. I don't know that they're obviously not going to trade for a wide receiver. Chris, remember the guy who sent us some hate mail? Guys, those of you watching right now.
Is that the from the last show?
I got an angry comment from a guy on our last podcast about wide receiver pay scale. Or I was laughing about how the Bills won't trade for a wide receiver. And we laughed about it. We chortled and then we moved on because I thought that you were all intelligent. And the guy goes, well, you didn't really explain that point. Go watch Cover One if you want someone to teach you the basics of how the salary cap works in football. I don't feel like I need to pander to my audience. I don't need to baby them. I just talk about football. If you don't get it, then this isn't for you. That's okay. That's okay. I'm just not your, I'm not your Huckleberry. Okay? I'm not your Doc Holliday. What I'll say is, Rasul Douglas took a while to find his stride. Multiple teams. He had to float around until he found a scheme and a pattern of usage where his aggressiveness and his physical play style could be utilized. You look at this now and you say, could he, like, the reason they haven't extended Rasul Douglas is it because they intend on giving Khalil Shakir, hey, he's our next guy up because we think he's ready. We think he's ready to be the Dane Jackson role, and we'll find out what comes next. And then after that, if he's ready, we can sign him to a modest contract at a time when we know we're going to have to extend Josh Allen, at a time when we know that our investments need to be capitalized on, and we think we can coach him into being something akin to what Rasul Douglas is right now.
Joe in the comments, how is this not for everyone? It's a drunk raving about football. You can't keep up.
Joe, this is it. People who don't understand will never understand. They'll never be able to appreciate.
If you want nuance, go to Cover One. They're
No,
friends
if
of
you want
ours.
me to teach you about the nuance, if I need to explain to you all of the salary cap machinations that go into, I don't know, like we just recorded earlier tonight with Elf Artiaga from 3 Yards Per Carry, a show about quarterback contracts and how all of these teams are marrying themselves to mid-level talent. And that's really good for Buffalo, even if Josh Allen is going to have to account for a higher percentage of the salary cap. I can have those conversations. I just don't want to all the time. Sometimes I just want to have a couple beers, get behind the microphone, talk about football topics that make me laugh or that I'm interested in.
Drew, when you say mid, you're talking about, in a wrestling reference, Bam Bam Bigelow. He's mid. That's Tua. That's Justin Herbert. That's mid. Is Bam Bam Bigelow.
The fact that I'm getting hit with a wrestling reference right now tells me it's probably time to wrap this thing. Guys, it's a lot of fun. I like doing these live shows. I hope that throughout the course of the offseason, we're going to have plenty of guests. We're going to have much more structured content as we ramp up towards training camp and then throughout training camp. And I think, Chris, if we can nail this down well enough, the actual process of going live, we're going to start doing all of our recap shows live here so that people can comment and make fun and crack jokes. Joe Fryer, I like this guy. I like the cut of his jib. It's not for everyone. It's a drunk raving about football. Listen, if they could put me on terrestrial radio, they might make money. If they could put me on terrestrial radio, they might make some money.
You know what we're about 6 weeks out from?
What?
Cover One meetup downtown. That's what we're about. We're about 6 weeks out from. If you want to come talk to me, Drew, Aaron, Greg, maybe Prohaska if he wants to come out, depending on his family situation. You can come out. There's going to be a bar. Hopefully it's Valley Allen where we did it last year, where you weren't at because Potter got married and you had to go to his fucking wedding.
I gave a best. You want to talk about weddings? I gave a best man speech with no phone. Tell me the last time you went to a wedding and saw someone give a best man or best what do they call that, maid of honor speech? Sans phone. Just you grab a mic, you have a cocktail in hand, you get up there and you talk. You just speak from the heart and you never have to think about what you said because it's honest. It's what I do here every week. I show up, I get behind a microphone and I say what I'm thinking, and I never have to think about how I said something or why I said it the way that I said it because it's honesty. It's just coming from here and here. And I like that.
Well, I mean, you know that. Joe, you're not wrong. It's too much swearing for AM, FM. 100% true.
Listen, some of the people who are still listening to AM radio need to ditch their cars anyway. The outrage that causes pileups, I think that there would be a net benefit to society in that range. Chris, we've been at this for 81 minutes. I think it's time we call it. What do you think?
Yeah. Also, next Sunday, 8:00, probably be live based on my my work schedule. Will be live.
Yeah. Guys, we're going to be doing this on Sundays for a while, so strap in. You got nothing else going on. There's no football. Baseball stinks.
You're the Alex Jones of Bill's podcast.
Yes! Guys, that's hilarious to me. Like, first of all, thank God the government's not taking every single thing I own. Second of all, yes, I do just yell into a microphone.
Just like Alex
bloviate.
Jones.
This is amazing. Guys, that's the high point that I'm going to hang this whole show on. This has been great. Thank you for showing up and being active in the chat. Guys, I've had a great time, but we got to get out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. A happy Father's Day to all of the dads out there. And this has been your Rockpile Report.